Hello, and welcome back to the Digital Lounge. I'm Mark Britton, and today we want to talk about governance. Governance. It's a topic that we know a lot of our clients are talking about at the moment with the sprawl of AI that's happening across many organizations. A lot of boardrooms are talking about how do we ensure that it's safe, that it's doing the right things, and there aren't any unintended consequences. Joining me today on the Digital Lounge is Ollie. Welcome back, Ollie. How you doing? All right.
Very, very good. Yeah, very good. How are you, Mark?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. I'm in the office today. We're both wearing red. Looks like you might be at home, but you're not at home often
Yeah,
these days. You're
I
you're out and
know.
about all over the country.
I am. It's a unique situation where I've actually managed to, find some time to stay in the office, at home in the back garden. So yeah, very nice. Yeah, yeah. But no, I have been out and about with a lot of customers, a lot of good conversations around AI and governance and where they should go next. So
Yeah.
this will be a really good conversation today.
Excellent. Well, Microsoft published a report in 2025 called the Responsible AI Transparency Report. And they said that more than 30% of organizations say a lack of governance and risk management is one of the biggest barriers to adopting and scaling AI. I think two things from that. First of all, that's a pretty chunky number. Secondly,
Mm.
2025 feels like an eternity ago. These things are moving so quickly now. I'd love to know where we stand at this moment. Does that reflect what you're seeing out there?
It does actually. It really does, and I think probably that percentage, it may well sort of have increased in terms of the people identifying lack of governance. When you're sat within the, I guess, the explorative sort of phase of generative AI and how that impacts your organization, you're still asking the question, sort of, can this technology work? Now, I think, there's been enough research, there's been enough practical exercise, there's been enough information out there and proof of concepts that generally speaking, the answer is, oh my word, yes, yes, it can do what we think it can do. Which then goes and the C-suite will then start to ask the next set of questions, which is, okay, great, but what information can it access? Can we trust the answer? Who's accountable for it? For the information being generated, and how do we stop the uncontrolled proliferation of what we've already seen by giving some of our employees the access to these wonderful tools? So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
So I think we've spoken around this topic previously, and I know that you said at the time that good AI governance framework shouldn't even feel like governance at all. But just as a reminder to people who maybe didn't catch that conversation previously, what do you mean by that? What does good
Yeah.
AI governance look like?
Well, and this is the thing, isn't it? Whenever you think about governance, everybody just goes, "Oh, snore, snore, boring, boring." Yeah, okay. We know we've got to do it. We've got to pay it lip service. But the fun stuff is, will it work? Can we get it done? And can we make the changes? And really, when governance works well, is when most users or most people interacting with the process see it as clarity rather than bureaucracy. And I think it's that bureaucratic element of it. If you're sat there and to be able to kickstart an initiative, and get it operational, you have to read through a very technical, wordy 7-page governance policy to get the right toolkit into your organization. Governance has failed. Let's be honest, right? So we should see it as, we should know which tools that users and business owners can use, which information is appropriate, and what they are responsible for checking, and when they need to involve the experts. And I always talk about it, and I've said it on a few podcasts. It's the right sliding scale of governance, is what you're really trying to aim for. But really, it's seeing governance as an operating model rather than something that just is a tick box exercise that has to happen. So it should tell people what ought to happen, and how sort of use cases can or initiatives can enter the organization, how the risks are assessed, when the controls need to be applied, and how it moves into production in a safe way. And that's the key to good governance. And we have a bit of a sort of an AI framework we've been working with our sort of our leading customers, and we kind of coined the phrase the AI factory. So it's like a factory. It's a process where, you know, there's a structure, there's an understanding to it, but it's not just some policy that you have to read and accept. It's a factory. It will get you something. You build something at the end of it, and that can be really simple as, you know, an AI front door, grabbing the ideas, and being very, very simple to understand those ideas rather than some obscure approval maze that people have to go through. Lightweight impact assessment or risk assessment at the earlier stages, and then maturing the consideration or the effort as clarity is added onto exactly, you know, what are we trying to do, how are we trying to do it, and what are we going to be exposing in terms of data, processes, ownership, etc. So yeah, it's kind of it's more of an operating model than a document that needs to be adhered to. That's really what the key message is for that one.
Yeah, I think it's the word governance, isn't it? I mean, I'm just thinking. I drove into the office today. There's governance, or there's a highway code. I know which side of the road to go on. I know how to go around an island, how to get onto the motorway, and all of that. And that's kind of a natural thing. I didn't even have to think about it. I suppose what you're suggesting with the AI factory model is aligning people around that sort of same way of thinking, I suppose. I think it's just the word governance. Immediately you just think, oh God.
But that's a really good point. It's a good analogy actually, because you look at the highway code now. All of that detail has already been agreed and designed, and it's known, right? So, and this is really the key for good governance, is that the rules are clear, that you don't have to ask permission for every design decision. So you don't have to get in your car and every time you go to a roundabout, you don't have to ask permission to go around that certain way and use the certain lanes, right? The idea is that somebody's already thought about that. They put the guardrails in there, and you as long as you follow the rules, as long as you have the right understanding, then you don't have to ask for permission. And this is where it's that tolerance level of approvals. You've got to get the right approvals at the right time. I'm certainly not saying no approvals, but you know, there are certain elements where, because we know what the expected result is, as long as you follow the already created rules for you, you don't have to seek approval. And that's the key element to it.
Yeah.
The guardrails.
Yeah, it's a brave new world. And have you got an example of a client that's maybe doing this particularly well at the moment? Obviously, without naming names, maybe there's something our listeners can learn from that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So there's one organisation that is a local authority that actually had quite a lot of enthusiasm for AI across multiple service areas within their organisation. So, funnily enough, the challenge wasn't generating the ideas, but it was making sure that those ideas could move forward consistently and safely. You know, in an AI factory, model. What went well in the beginning, they kind of avoided the large policy written exercise, and what they did was they kind of created that practical front door, which I sort of talked about earlier, and brought together business, the technology, and the information governance with an added security and operational expertise early on. So they were making those considerations and involving the right people quite early on, when they had got past the sort of the initial, yeah, we actually think this is a good idea. So each idea was assessed against a very short set of questions. What outcome are we seeking? Who's going to be affected? There was what data was going to be involved, and you know, what happens if it goes wrong. So those, you know, really obvious questions that you'd expect to ask were asked. And because you're asking those questions in a consistent way, you can actually put together what we classify, and we've got this from Microsoft, is a design canvas that irons out all of those different areas and kind of and has that as a consistent sort of banner of like, well, this is our initiative and these are the things that we've kind of agreed. The good thing about that is you can very quickly identify low risk ideas where they can be moved into a controlled environment relatively quickly, because there's no consideration around data loss prevention, or what they're trying to do with AI isn't sort of creating things in source systems. It's actually more around content summarization and generation of reporting, which, okay, yeah, doesn't it still, there's still elements of risk, but not as much. So they did really well in that aspect. So the lessons we learned from that really are, you don't involve every governance functions in every minor decisions, kind of what we're saying about the guardrails, but you bring the right people in early enough to shape the solution, so that it's not just about the approval at the end, it's about the consistent consideration of what you're trying to build, and making sure that when and this is one of the reasons why you're including sort of technology and expert technology specialists, is because you want to identify some of the sort of the repeatable components or the reusable patterns and templates, so that you can get velocity quicker. So there was lots of lessons learned in that, but it was really good. And what was interesting is the success factor was, it's not that they didn't remove the risk, but what they made is they made the risk visible, and they had the right owners and they had the right management to make sure that those risks were sorted. So it worked very well. It's really good.
Brilliant. I mean, you've worked with quite a few organisations now who are trying to move from AI experimentation to real world adoption and scale. Is there anything that's particularly surprised you most about that experience that you've had so far with those people?
Yeah, so I guess what's funnily enough, what surprised me the most is a lot of a lot of organisations still, and I guess this is possibly because it's still early on in the journey, right? We're still early on in this journey. The organisations often really worried about the model, the inference model, or the actual sort of the technology element. But the real delivery problems we've found are around the poor quality content, the ambiguous process ownership, or the permissions that have sort of grown organically. So, with everything, if you're trying to implement incremental AI into a known and understood business process, an end user's view of that process might be quite simplistic, whereas actually the data tells a slightly different story. Now, where there is, ambiguous process ownership, is sometimes that data does switch between different owners, and actually the permissions on where that's manipulated and where that's changed isn't as clear as it would be if, for example, it was in a fully fledged, well-known system. And so one of those tricky elements, actually, funnily enough, isn't the end solution, the end agent. It's actually what the agent relies on. So the context, the data, and how that process is going to flow. So, the proof of concept is a really good way of discovering those ambiguity elements within the process you're trying to improve, and that's something that can work really well. So starting with proof of concepts can iron out some of those discovery elements, and then once you've got that, then production governance, because we've always said if you involve the right decision makers at the right time and the right considerations, production governance proves that organizations can operate it responsibly. So that was probably one of the biggest surprises, that actually agents work. This is brilliant. It's done in the right way. It's great. But don't forget about the core element is data, the ownership of those processes, and how it's actually trying to fight, how it's actually supposed to work in reality.
Interesting. It reminds me, just for listeners' benefit, I used to work in the ERP world, and uh, the, the, the consultancy would go in and review processes, and often organizations that the processes, as you say, would be ambiguous. They hadn't been reviewed for a long time, and it was actually that review that would straighten out that process, and then you'd implement the technology. And it makes you wonder how much of it is actually reviewing the process that creates the efficiency rather than the technology. Obviously a mixture
That's
of
it.
both.
Absolutely, Mark, and this is a funny one. We've seen this, this label of, okay, well, let's look at how we implement AI to increase the efficiencies of your process. And you're dead right. Some of the big efficiency gains we've seen is there's now clarity around that process. And actually, don't worry about AI, guys. Actually, let's have a look at that process, and there's maybe a bit of automation or a bit of, an unknown bottleneck that people were not aware of, and because there was a slightly more of a lens on their process, they've made some gains from a transformation perspective. So absolutely, don't get me wrong, AI revolutionary, but actually it gives businesses the opportunities just to have another look at those processes and get real good process efficiency.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about process mining before. If listeners go to crimson.co.uk and check out our blog and search for process mining, you'll find some more information there. Just bringing it back to our discussion then. So in your recent blog on the Crimson blog, you made a distinction between human in the loop and expert in the loop, and this is a fairly recent term to me, human in the loop. But now we've got another one. Well, how would you define that distinction? What?
Yeah. So it, it vexes me that where we look at agentic processes, and where we look at agents, where we look at generative AI being embedded in a process. When you start getting smart with this, what you want to be doing is allowing the solution to make decisions and interact autonomously, but it doesn't stop overall sort of responsibility of somebody being able to approve or to make the right judgment calls on that. And where people get sort of lulled into sort of a false reassurance is when you say human in the loop. Fine. Well, then all we need to do is then just put an approve button at the end of the process, right? And then somebody has to click it, and then hey presto, we've got a governed process by an individual. That's human in the loop, and it's like that's kind of a false reassurance. What you actually want is somebody that understands what's happened in that process, understood the inputs, understands what outcome we're trying to achieve, and making sure that it's done correctly. The only person that could do that is the expert. So why I say I make the big differentiation between human in the loop versus expert in the loop is, with some of these really critical sort of AI processes or really critical processes in the organization, you will always have to have an expert into the loop. It's not a rubber stamp exercise. This is, domain and business professionals with enough AI literacy to understand the varying levels of outputs this solution will get you, but it's actually going to get you the right security controls. So a person clicking approve, it's not a control unless they know what they're approving and they have confidence to say no. So that for me is it very much the proliferation of the label of AI slop, right? People just chucking a load of stuff into generative AI, masking it as their own and producing something is another example of what I classify as human in the loop rather than expert in the loop. If you were an expert in a certain technology or a certain subject, and you had generative AI, maybe an incorrect prompt or something quite ambiguous in your prompt, it was generating something. As an expert, you would know when it's right or wrong. You would know when things were hallucinating or not quite put in the right context. As a human, you would just approve that. As an expert, you would say no. So
Right.
that's where I really want to draw the line and the distinction.
Right. Okay. Um, so I think let's turn our attention to ethics. So some of the biggest AI governance decisions aren't necessarily technical, of course. They're ethical. So how should organizations think about the difference between what AI can do and what it should do?
Yeah, ethics is a big one. It is a big one. Don't get me
Mm,
wrong. There are so much opportunities to gain efficiencies in hyper automation and agentic processing and really trying to remove that manual effort. but there are sometimes there's reasons why we have to make those considerations, why there needs to be an expert in the loop. And ethics is a massive one for us. Just because the technology is capable, and I've coined this, I've used this, I don't know where I got the phrase from, but I use this phrase a lot. Just because the technology can, you still have to answer, should it? Should it
Mm.
do this? Should we be taking this away from human consideration? And hey, look, let's not forget generative AI, the very, very smart large language inference models that we're using are just very, very smart calculators. And as we've known through, not just AI, but general analytics and probability scoring, that can produce bias. It can produce a lot of bias. It can produce things that actually the outcome, the macro outcome, is not actually what you're trying to achieve. So AI works in patterns and available information that it has, but the data may not contain the full context or someone's circumstances. So statistically plausible recommendation could actually still be really inappropriate for, if we're talking about local authority, for a specific citizen, a customer, an employee, for other areas. So when data cannot capture every single nuance of individual circumstances. So when there are decision rights where it is, it will impact the individual, you have to make a call and have to understand where your ethics, where your ethics lies, and where the expert absolutely has to be in the loop. So it boils back down to 5 questions in my idea. What's the purpose? So what's the outcome you're trying to improve? Who's going to benefit? So who are the people involved? Who's going to benefit? Who's going to be disadvantaged or harmed if the decision rights were taken away from an expert? What's the data? As I said before, the data, is it appropriate? Is it representative? Is it lawfully usable is another thing. There are different rules and regulations around the different types of data that an organization will hold. And then decisioning. So is AI informing? Is it recommending? Or is it being autonomous and deciding? And at what level should it decide? And then it's accountability. Just because you have an autonomous process, that doesn't change the accountability of the business owner, the product owner, or the data owner. So you have to be really clear with those 5 elements to make sure that ethically you're still doing the right thing.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know ethics, as you say, is a big one with AI at the moment. And in fact, just over the last week, there was an article on the BBC about social care and AI, and yeah, fairly controversial. Although I felt that it wasn't necessarily representative of some of the work that's really going on in that sector. And I know we're part of that as well. Okay, so just wrapping up. Again, without naming a client, have you got any examples where an AI initiative appeared successful on the surface, but actually governance concerns emerged later, and what was learnt from that at all?
Yeah, yeah. Again, to be honest with you, because a lot of our organisations that we're working with are branching out of explorative AI, and they're
Mm,
into looking at what we call simple productivity with tools like M365 Copilot, Cowork, and then start sort of touching on declarative agents within M365 or Copilot Studio extensions. What we're sort of seeing is um, a specific a specific organization, again, a different local authority, but a local authority we're working with, seen real strong grassroots enthusiasm with AI, and they've got really good suggestions, and they're starting to build agents. So employees with useful agents, so declarative agents using their M365 Copilot licensing, on the surface looks like really healthy innovation. It looks like brilliant. These guys are not only using M365 as an assistant and generating emails, generating PowerPoint presentations, summarizing documentations, amazing. They're also taking that leap into creating their own agents. Now, the concern emerged where we kind of then started to look at the overall estate of where agents were being proliferated. At some, unfortunately, were being connected into sort of live systems and live informations, and there wasn't a clear boundary between sort of what people are trying to work on, trying to develop and play with, versus production boundaries, those boundaries were unclear. So there was no sort of real sort of route to register, to review that by a technical expert, just in case, to then have the right ownership and the right level of this. And funnily enough, this came at a right time where Microsoft are actually introducing kind of their control pane for agents, and it's called Agent 365. And we are looking to implement Agent 365 in this organization to help control that proliferation. What we're really keen on doing is not just putting the guardrails down, telling everybody no, stop, because there is a lot of innovation, there's a lot of motivation for these employees to do the right thing. We need to help them. So IT and business owners and the governance and security needs to help them in the right way. So some of the tools that we'll be using around M365, so 365 Agent 365, that gives you really clear observability, and it gives you some clear governance tooling and security elements to help you understand where that proliferation is happening and start to sort of dovetail that back into something that can be managed and can work really, really well. So it was really funny. It was the warning signs were not the agents were failing, is that they weren't succeeding fast enough and they were proliferating out of control. And that's, again, why we dovetail back into this message of governance, why it's so important to be more of an operating model as an enabler rather than a bog standard thing that people have to tick in the box. So yeah, that was a very interesting one, but we're working towards resolving that and helping them get onto the right path.
Amazing. I don't know how you find the time, Ollie. I mean, just if any of the listeners are interested in learning more about this topic, do check out our website, crimson.co.uk, and Ollie's blog in particular. Just go to the insights area on our website. The blog that Ollie's put together is "What is AI governance? Why the best governance frameworks don't feel like governance." So check that out and share that with your colleagues. Ollie, it's amazing to have you on the show as always. Love chatting. Wish we had more time, but
I
I can see
know.
why we don't. So yeah, have a great weekend, and I'll catch up with you soon. Thanks a lot.
You too, Mark. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, so that's it for today's Digital Lounge. And if you want to be kept up to date with future episodes, join our newsletter. It's info.crimson.co.uk/newsletter, and we'll keep you posted with what else we've got on. But it's a two-way communication. Let us know what you'd like to hear on the show. There's a lot going on in the Microsoft world, and of course we work across higher education, housing, local government as well. We're all about public impact, so we love to have discussions with the industry and learn what's going on as well. But that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again very soon on the Digital